Rita.
OK, Susan, thank you. And that is today's BBC News at 6. You can, of course, as always, keep up with the latest developments on the BBC website. From 6 o'clock, team, it is goodbye. But the news continues here on BBC One. As now it's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Bye-bye.
This is Tuesday's BBC Newsline. Tonight's top stories. The Secretary of State says the continued Stormont stalemate is the biggest threat to the Union.
I make no apologies for being proud of Northern Ireland's place in the Union and for wanting it to continue. Others who share that view should put the Union first, restore the devolved institutions and get on with the job of delivering for the people of Northern Ireland.
28 years after his first visit to Derry, President Clinton returned today to pay tribute to the peacemakers John Hume and David Trimble.
Most of you here were born after the Good Friday Agreement, but it was your future that John Hume and David Trimble were thinking about.
One of Ireland's best-known mountaineers, Noel Hannah, has died during an expedition in Nepal. A serving and former PSNI officer faced prosecution over photos taken at the scenes of sudden deaths. More than 20 cars are set alight in Newtownards in an attack linked to a loyalist feud.
And there's a real feeling of spring in our weather through the rest of this week. I'll have all the details just before 7.
It's the 18th of April. I'm Tara Mills. Welcome to the programme. The DUP has reacted furiously after the Secretary of State, Chris HeatonHarris, said the continued stalemate at Stormont is the biggest threat to the Union. He made the comments at a conference at Queen's University to mark 25 years since the Good Friday Agreement. Former MP Lord Dodds called the remarks disgraceful, while the current MP Gavin Robinson said it was more akin to a speech by a clueless Irish-American congressman than a British cabinet minister. Our political correspondent Gareth Gordon reports.
This man knows where he wants our politics to go, and gentle persuasion, he obviously feels, is no longer the way to get there.
Like David Trimble and David Irvine before in 1998 and Dr. Paisley in 2006, real leadership is about knowing when to say yes and having the courage to do so.
That must have been aimed at the DUP leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, and there was more to come.
The biggest threat to Northern Ireland's place in the Union is failing to deliver on these priorities. I make no apologies for being proud of Northern Ireland's place in the Union and for wanting it to continue. Others who share that view should put the Union first, restore the devolved institutions and get on with the job of delivering for the people of Northern Ireland.
It was the clearest sign yet the government has run out of patience with the DUP. When Chris HeatonHarris was appointed Secretary of State, it was viewed as a sop to the DUP. But there's no doubt, post-Windsor framework, he and his government are now trying to ramp up pressure on that party. The DUP leader was not present to hear the remarks. The woman tipped to be Deputy First Minister if Stormont is restored was.
And the longest period of stability was under the DUP and Sinn Féin from 2007 until 2017. That's 10 years. And it isn't easy. It's compromise. It's talking about all these policy initiatives. It's finding a way through by working together. We need to get back at that, not shouting at each other and demeaning and calling our genuine grievances manufactured. That doesn't work.
But there was little sympathy among the other leaders.
So the question now has to be, particularly for the DUP, you now arrive at a crossroads and a moment of decision. And I sincerely say to you, I really pray that that decision is the right decision, because it seems to me unconscionable that we stay in this limbo and that we drift.
But we fought the last election in May on a system of government that we were going to employ. Sinn Féin became the largest party. If they are not allowed to take their place, and if we're not allowed to get a government up and running now, then we really are trampling all over democracy here in Northern Ireland.
And
Emma talks about exclusion. The only people excluding the DUP are the DUP themselves. You have to opt in. We've heard the concerns, we've listened to them, we could hear little else, frankly, over the last couple of years. But I think the deal is now done, and you've got to make a call, you've got to get back in.
I do understand why unionism is uncomfortable with the protocol and with the Windsor framework, but I can't understand how you did not see this coming with Brexit. And that's where I'm lost. This is, and I'm not saying that to make a cheap political point. I am not, Emma.
It was an uncomfortable morning for the DUP politician, possibly a sign of things to come. Unless, of course, the DUP is thinking of a return to Stormont, hinted at by this former US president who met the party leader yesterday.
I left that meeting more optimistic than I entered it. But I don't think I should talk about what we talked about because I'm not in government for the United States or for Northern Ireland or for the Irish Republic or for the UK. So I'm here as a friend.
Friends seem thin on the ground for the DUP here today, but the word from the party is pressure like this will change nothing. Gareth Gordon, BBC Newsline, Queen's University, Belfast.
Well, the former US President Bill Clinton has been attending a special event at the Guildhall in Londonderry. It's been organised to pay tribute to John Hume and David Trimble as architects of the Good Friday Agreement. Let's go live to our political editor, Enda McClafferty, who's in Derry for us this evening. Enda.
Well, Tara, we may not have had the tens of thousands of people who turned out back in 1995 on a cold autumn night to welcome President Bill Clinton, what was his first visit here to the city. But there's no mistaking the warmth of the reception he received here today. And you might be able to hear the crowd cheering behind me because they know that President Clinton is about to emerge very shortly to go on a walkabout through the city centre here today. As you say, he was here primarily to remember the contribution of John Hume and David Trimble in building peace in Northern Ireland. But this was not a day to look back. Very much it was a day for President Clinton to look forward. And he tailored his speech inside the Guildhall to those many young people who were in the crowd in front of him, as our Northwest correspondent Kieran Turish now reports.
Bill Clinton has always received a warm welcome here. These were the scenes in 1995 when he visited a packed Guildhall Square with the then First Lady Hillary Clinton. He was accompanied by John Hume, who always deeply appreciated the input of the American government in building peace here. Today, Bill Clinton was back inside the Guildhall to pay tribute to the late SDLP leader and his Ulster Unionist counterpart, the late Lord Trimble.
I'm sorry that John and Pat aren't here. I'm sorry that David's not here. I'm sorry Seamus Mallon's not here. I'm sorry Martin McGuinness didn't live to see this day.
The event, entitled Making Hope and History Rhyme, celebrated John Hume and Lord Trimble through music and poetry, as well as reflections on their legacy. John Hume's granddaughter recited a poem she first read at his graveside after his funeral.
You always had a talent for bringing people round to your way of thinking. Because of you, an entire nation gets to live in a happier, more hopeful reality. Because of you, my generation enjoy peace and security we often take for granted.
I'm just very proud of my granddad. Like seeing sort of, his legacy being commemorated in such ways. You know, I'm very proud to call him my grandfather and, say I'm part of his family.
Since he's passed away, with all the kind of coverage there's been in the news, it's definitely made me realise more, like the big impact he's had on the society in Northern Ireland and how much he changed everything.
It's a little bit melancholic, I suppose, but I'm glad. I think he's getting the recognition that I believe he deserves. I mean, there's lots of people whose fingerprints are over the agreement, but there are certain people who, without them, I'm not sure it would have happened, and I would put him in that category. And I think it's just nice that he's getting that recognition now. When you're in the thick of politics, you know, sometimes people aren't the kindest to you, but, you know, with the passage of time and obviously his passing, then I think people have had the time to reflect and realise the great sacrifice and the great risk that he took to get us to where we are today.
Bill Clinton has remained steadfast in his support for the peace process in Northern Ireland, and it's clear from his address in the Guildhall to the many young people here today, he wants to see Stormont restored so that the elected members can face the challenges of 2023 and embrace the opportunities in the months and years ahead. Kieran Turish, BBC Newsline, Derry.
And what stood out from President Clinton's visit today?
Well, I think, Tara, this felt very much like a homecoming for President Clinton because he's very fond of this city. He's got a lot of friends in this city on the many times he visited here. And you got a real sense of that when he got to his feet in the stage in the Guildhall today. But I think this was about President Clinton making sure that those young people in the audience really appreciated what happened in the past. The fact that people like John Hume and David Trimble laid out the foundations for the peace process, which they are now enjoying. But he also said that they should remember that they're now living a dream, if you like, and haven't inherited the nightmares that their parents were forced to endure during the darkest days of the Troubles. But it wasn't just about John Hume and David Trimble today. There was another person mentioned in the Guildhall, and that was Lyra McKee, who was murdered in Derry 4 years ago today. And President Clinton made sure that she had a special place in his speech today, and he said her murder sent out a very powerful statement that peace is never permanent and it needs to be constantly worked at.
And what should we take from the Secretary of State's swipe at the DUP?
Well, we've known for some time that there's been great tension behind the scenes between London, Dublin and indeed Brussels directed at the DUP because there was a belief that by the time we had reached this point, the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, that the Stormont institutions would be back up and running. And I think today we saw that frustration starting to bubble over with those comments from Chris HeatonHarris, the Secretary of State, talking about real leadership involves taking courageous decisions to say yes. And then the DUP talking back and saying that he was speaking like a careless Irish-American politician instead of a UK government minister. And you can really feel it, I think, that the UK government, perhaps feeling pressure from Washington to get tough with the DUP, came out with that pretty public statement today. Of course, what does it mean for the negotiations taking place behind the scenes? London and the DUP are talking right now to see if a pathway can be found back to power sharing. I think it'll make conversations pretty difficult, but I think the stakes are too high for any long-term damage to that particular process. And as we know from the past, the DUP doesn't really respond to political pressure.
And Derry, thanks very much. And you can see a full interview with President Clinton on this week's edition of The View. That's on Thursday night after our late news here on BBC One. Still to come on the programme, Tony Blair and Bertie Ahern face tough questions about the Good Friday Agreement on a visit to a North Belfast school. The mountaineer and adventurer Noel Hannah from Dramara in County Down has died in Nepal. During his career, Noel scaled Mount Everest 10 times and became the first person from the island of Ireland to successfully summit and descend K2. Our South East reporter Cormac Campbell has more.
For some, the mountains are a pastime. For Noel Hannah, they were a way of life.
Camp 2 today, slept in Camp 1 last night. Very, very cold. The winds tonight's going to be 50-60 kilometres an hour at Camp 2, so we decided just to go halfway up and then back down to base camp. I'll let you see where we are.
In 2021, before embarking on a mission to recover the bodies of 5 climbers who died on K2, he spoke about the dangers of climbing.
But it's just, you be more careful yourself. You know, whenever you're coming down, you're thinking, I'm going to clip on here twice, or just be more careful at the anchors and the ropes. You know that going out onto the mountain, if there's 20 climbers, you know it's very rarely that the whole 20 climbers are coming back.
During his career, Noel scaled Mount Everest 10 times and became the first person from the island of Ireland to successfully summit and descend K2.
I'm here with K2 in the background. Very cold night last night. Time to go and leave the summit of K2 behind. Bye.
His death came while descending from the summit of Annapurna in Nepal. Today, there were tributes.
We have a great community here, and in Dramara and Finnis and everywhere else, and all my friends and family, and everybody just loved Noel and knew what kind of character and how good a fella he was. I'm proud of what he's achieved, and most of all, I'm proud to be he's my wee brother, which I'll miss so much.
We're talking about the 8,000 metre mountain, so 10 times, that of Donard, and you've got the altitude and things like that. He was a guide on these mountains, so keeping the safety of everybody else as well as himself on the mountain. He's a fantastic individual.
Noel Hannah leaves behind a legacy of records and achievements. The man from Dramara who stood on top of the world. Cormac Campbell, BBC Newsline.
A serving and former police officer are to be prosecuted for offences, including alleged sharing of images taken at the scenes of sudden deaths. Court summons are being prepared, and the two police officers investigated by the Police Ombudsman's Office are expected to appear in court in the coming weeks. Kelly Bonner has the details.
The move by the Public Prosecution Service follows an investigation by the Police Ombudsman for Northern Ireland. The PPS say the investigation was complex and substantial.
This case centres around two police officers, one former officer and one serving officer. Both are to be prosecuted for alleged misconduct in public office. The range of offences include the alleged sharing of imagery taken at scenes of sudden deaths.
The story came to light last year after a BBC Spotlight investigation revealed the officers were being investigated for allegations they manipulated a person who died by suicide's body and shared photos and a video online. A few weeks later, a second family, the Lennons, told BBC Newsline that a police officer was being investigated after allegedly trying to share images of their dead brother. Jim Lennon was 46 when he took his own life in 2012. It's understood it is the same officer who has since been sacked from the PSNI. The other police officer in this investigation is currently suspended. In a separate but connected case, a man appeared in court last month charged with 3 counts of improper use of a public electronic communications network and the alleged sharing of imagery captured at the scenes of sudden deaths. That case is due in court next month.
4 families are involved in these investigations. The PPS say they will continue to engage with these families as these 2 separate prosecutions progress. Kelly Bonner, BBC Newsline in Belfast.
Now, a number of cars have been set on fire at a dealership in the Lansdowne Industrial Estate in Newtownards. The PSNI believes the incident may be linked to the ongoing feud between rival drug gangs across Ards and North Down. Aileen Moyner reports.
Burnt and broken. This is what remains after what police are calling an arson attack in Newtownards in the early hours of this morning. 25 cars and a trailer were badly damaged in the blaze at this car dealership in Lansdowne Industrial Estate. Police have now started an investigation into what they say was a completely reckless attack which could have had serious consequences, but that thankfully no one was injured.
Police say they're keeping an open mind as to the motivation behind this attack, but that a primary line of inquiry is that it is linked to the ongoing feud between rival drugs gangs across Ards and North Down.
This comes after shots were fired at a first-floor flat in nearby Shackleton Walk on Sunday night. Police say no one was inside at the time, but that 2 shots damaged the living room and bedroom windows. This attack is also being linked to the ongoing feud between drugs gangs. Police are appealing to anyone with any information about either of these incidents to contact them. Aileen Moyna, BBC Newsline in Newtownards.
People Before Profit has called for all council services in Northern Ireland to be brought back into public control, including leisure and recycling. The proposal is contained in its manifesto for next month's local government election, which also backs inflation-busting pay rises for council workers. People Before Profit is running a record 15 candidates and is hoping to add to the 5 seats it won in 2019.
Council wages haven't gone up with inflation year on year, despite the fact that rates have gone up. So we're kind of presented with this conundrum. How do you fund services? How do you fund wages? But our services have been cut. All we're simply looking to do is restore what has been cut away from our local communities. We would like to bring our services back in-house, and we would just like to make sure that our workers are getting a basic above inflation pay rise. That should be the minimum.
Well, we've been hearing about some of the special events being held this week to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Earlier today, the former Prime Minister Tony Blair and former Taoiseach Bertie Ahern answered questions about the agreement from young people at a school in North Belfast. BBC Newsline's Sarah Gervin was there.
As instrumental figures in the Good Friday Agreement, Tony Blair and Bertie Ahern are used to tough talking. Today, they face tough questions from these pupils in North Belfast.
I think the most important thing for the young people is to understand we have made a huge amount of progress in the last 25 years, but it's got to be built on. And there are still huge problems to be solved in Northern Ireland, and it requires the active engagement of young people.
For the young people involved, today was a chance to reflect on the past and look to the future.
I asked if you, looking back from today, was there anything you do differently or change about the Good Friday Agreement? It was really important what Bertie Ahern said about the legacy of some of the families damaged by the Troubles and people who are harmed by the violence, and how if he would have maybe done more for them. I'll be 18 soon, I'll be voting in elections. It's good to know about the history and why you're voting.
We need to understand that where we've been has been times of trouble, has been times of conflict and disagreement, but we have learned from that we can move on and we can move past.
I asked in regards to the release of political prisoners in the Good Friday Agreement if they thought the decision they made was the right one, and the fact that they said that it was something that needed to be done, and obviously it wasn't an easy decision for them. I definitely think it was a really important experience to show where we've come from and to not forget.
The former Prime Minister and former Taoiseach told the crowd that when the Good Friday negotiations got tough, they simply had to keep going. So what's their assessment of the current political limbo at Stormont?
You know, we had many, many obstacles after the Good Friday Agreement. There were years of to and fro and difficult obstacles we had to overcome. You just got to keep working at it, and hopefully they will. And you know, for the people here in Northern Ireland, they need their own government back in place, you know, working for the people.
Now there's a new generation of politicians that have to show the same kind of collective leadership. It wasn't just the two of us, it was a whole group of people. That's really their challenge, and they can't let the people in Northern Ireland down, because if they don't achieve you know, the workings of the institutions, then they are leaving the people down.
Sarah Gervin, BBC Newsline in North Belfast.
Some sports news now, and in ice hockey, the Belfast Giants completed the Grand Slam of winning all 3 Elite League trophies at the weekend, and their popularity with their supporters continues to grow, as Nigel Ringland reports.
It's been an unforgettable season for the Belfast Giants, returning home with all 3 Elite League trophies and sharing that success with their supporters.
You know, these fans have been amazing all year. I view it as a privilege to play for the city of Belfast, and to be able to bring this 3rd one home to them is really special.
It all came to a climax on Sunday night in Nottingham when they beat the Cardiff Devils to win the playoffs, adding to the league and cup already won. It's a season that has seen attendances at home games at an all-time high and demand for season tickets for next year at a level not seen before.
You see what's happening here, you see what's happening at home with the attendances. It's special, and to get this done in that fashion, to reward them for what they did all year for us. The atmosphere was fantastic. They put the full bowl in from way more than we're normally used to, and that also allows us to bring in those extra players to make sure that we had the depth on the run.
It's a connection between the team and the fan base that continues to grow. Nigel Ringland, BBC Newsline.
Mark Allen progressed into the second round of the World Championships, winning 10 frames to 5 against Fan Zhenhui. But the match was disrupted when protesters entered the playing area around both of the tables at the Crucible last night. After a 40-minute delay, Allen and his Chinese opponent returned to conclude the match. Allen is back in action on Thursday. Time for the weather now. Jeff is here with the forecast. Hi, Jeff.
Hello, good evening to you. Doesn't
a bit of sunshine make all the difference in the world. The blossom on the trees in Newry looking absolutely stunning today, and we've had plenty of sunshine to go with it. But you know what that means as we go into the evening time. With those clear skies, temperatures are going to drop away. I think we'll stay above freezing, but some parts of the west could get down to 2 or 3 degrees. It's not a mistake, there's just not a lot of cloud to show on our graphics there, at least not until first thing tomorrow morning, because this has been the picture for most of us through this afternoon. It has been lovely. And I think tomorrow is going to start off in similar fashion. We've still got that easterly flow, so that'll just give us a bit of a cold feel to the day. And we will start to see that cloud feeding in as well. The top temperatures tomorrow, 12 to 14 Celsius, and staying pretty much dry wall to wall. So another very nice day. As we head into the evening period, that cloud will fizzle away, clear skies again. You know what that means. The temperatures are going to drop away. This time down to maybe 1 or 2 degrees in the west. Just a little bit warmer than that elsewhere, but still a chilly night to come. The good news is that with this drying breeze and the dry conditions, it is helping to dry out the ground, which is still pretty soggy at the moment. And Thursday is going to be another lovely day. We've got that dry, cool air coming in from the east, so plenty of sunshine, still that easterly breeze. So a difference in the temperatures, 11 to 13 down the coast, 13 or 14 degrees further inland. But again, wall-to-wall spring sunshine on Thursday, and the setup remains in place. But come Friday, we're just going to start to see a little bit of a change. A few rogue weather fronts pushing up there, and they will bring some rain across parts of Britain on Friday. But for Northern Ireland, at least, I think through the daylight hours, we should stay pretty dry again, 14, 15 degrees, dry sunshine for us. So we head into the weekend, well, things do start to break down and turning noticeably cooler by the time we get to next week. We may even see a frost. But do you know what? Tonight, the sun is shining. We're not going to worry about any of that and just enjoy it. Tara.
Make the most of it, Jeff. Thanks very much. That's it for now. Our late news is at 10:30. Until then, you can keep up to date with the BBC News NI website and, of course, with Radio Ulster. But thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
This is BBC One Northern Ireland. Now a party election broadcast by Sinn Féin.
I have had the privilege of meeting people from all communities over recent months. I've been welcomed into homes, community centres, schools and businesses. And what has struck me most is that we all want the same things. Our political institutions up and running, a health system that works, the very best for our children, investment in our local communities, and the opportunity for local businesses to thrive. We want the cost of living crisis brought under control, and the knowledge that we are building a better future for generations to come. I have felt your hope and your optimism that we can move forward together and that we can work together in local councils and in the Assembly to put your interests first, to make politics work and to deliver real change for all of our communities. We must stand together against the Tory government that seeks to dismantle the NHS and make the rich richer while workers and families are struggling to pay their bills. We can do so much better if we govern ourselves.